My latest hyperfixation has been Greek mythology, for no apparent reason at all. In the past month, I've reread the 5 Percy Jackson books, plus the 5 Heroes of Olympus books, but I need more. So I'm going to pick out 3 to 5 Greek mythology retellings, and we're going to see how many of them we can get into. I want to read at least 3 of them, but I'm not going to force myself to read all 5. So these are the 5 books I picked, and we're going to spin the wheel and see which one of these I'm going to get to first. We have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, Circe by Madeline Miller, A Thousand Ships by Natalie Haynes, and Piranesi by Susanna Clark. Okay, so let's spin the wheel. Okay, first book is Circe by Madeline Miller. Okay, so I'm only 15% into the book and I already need to do updates. So far, I'm liking Madeline Miller's writing. It's very straightforward and easy to understand, but it's still eloquent. It's like there's an eloquence to its simplicity, which I think is a very delicate balance that I think so far she's being able to pull off. So in the first few chapters, we're still getting to know who her family is. And they all suck. That family hates her guts ever since she was born. Her mother basically only cares about social status and she wants to be king with the Olympians. So when Circe was born, her dad Helios, which is like the god of prophecy, he issued a prophecy that was like, oh, Circe, she's gonna end up falling in love with a mortal man. So when her mom hears this, she's like, oh, that's not gonna work. And by the way, the only reason she has children is because she found out that having children will make her sisters jealous. So she has like 1,000 babies, all right? 1,000 babies, and every single one of them hate Circe. It's not that they hate her, it's more that they're extremely indifferent to her. Like, the girl could be caught on fire and they won't give a shit. They literally do not care about her existence at all. As soon as Circe popped out of that woman's belly, she's like, oh, she's not gonna be useful to me. So she turned to her husband and said, let's make a new one. Mind you, all of her siblings pay no mind to her except for like one brother, but then grows up and then he finds out that he's gonna be a king of somewhere. I don't give a fuck. He turns to Circe and says, at least now that I'm gone, I won't need to hear the sound of your voice anymore. Like, girl can't catch a break. So we're basically following Circe's life until like one day she's like walking. I don't remember where she's walking, which is kind of concerning considering the fact that I just read this chapter like 5 minutes ago. She's walking somewhere and then she stumbles upon this man. We, the reader, like, we know that this is the man that she's going to end up falling in love with, but she doesn't know that yet. Well, at least I think this is going to be the man she's going to fall in love with. By all means, this might be another man who's going to backstab her. But she meets this man, and this man is very nice to her. And she's like, wow, poor girl's been catching strays ever since she was born. This is like the first time in her life someone has ever treated her with like an infinitesimal morsel glimpse of care and respect and just like the basic decency. So she's like, maybe I am falling in love. Okay, I found it. This is what she actually says. She says, I had stood beside my father's light. I had held Aeetes in my arms, and my bed was heaped with thick wool blankets woven by immortal hands. But it was not until that moment that I think I had ever been warm. Yes, I told him, I will be here. Like, you know what? I don't blame her. I just hope that this man doesn't backstab her. We're only 15% into the book, mind you. This can either go one of two ways. Either this is the man that she's going to end up falling in love with, or he's going to betray her, as every person in her life has done before.
Let me just go in the bush and weep. Let me just go in the bush and weep. I just have to go in the bush and weep. Really. I don't understand. I swear to God, I don't understand.
See, I should have known better. I'm currently at my job, so I'm going to try to speak quietly, and I'm trying to see if my boss is going to come in. But basically, rule of thumb is never trust a man ever. You do one nice thing for a man, and what does he do? It's insane to me how every single character in this book perpetually underestimates Circe, like, for everything. Like, there was this one thing that happened that she did that she wasn't supposed to do, and she's like, okay, I made a mistake. I'm gonna own up to my mistakes. I'm gonna take responsibility for my actions. I'm gonna tell my dad what I did. She opens up to him and says like, oh, this is, you know, that thing that happened that nobody knew what the fuck was going on? Yeah, that was me. I did that. And he's like, no, you didn't. You were dreaming. You were probably just imagining it. Like, you were dreaming. You were probably dreaming. Like, everybody in that meeting was trying to gaslight the fuck out of her. They think that she's so incompetent, she can't even do that.
So it's been a couple of days and I've just finished Circe. From where we left off, she was banned to the island of Aiaia, where she has to stay for eternity. And from there on, we follow her new life there. We follow the people that she meets and the people that eventually leave. We follow her studying magic and harnessing her powers. And something I've noticed is that there's this almost stillness in this book. It almost feels like a posthumous novel, even though she's immortal. Like, even when very climatic and emotional things are happening, you still feel pretty distant because she's narrating everything from a bird's eye view. It's the Circe from the present telling you her life story through the centuries of her life, and God, does it feel like it. It does feel like you spend centuries reading this book because it is so slow. It is very slow paced. And maybe that's just immortality. When you live forever, time tends to move by slowly, and you can tell. I'm gonna give the author the benefit of the doubt and say that that was a stylistic choice and not like a fault of the book. I'm gonna give Circe 3 stars. Hello. The quality's probably shitty, but before I go to bed, I just wanted to choose the next book because I forgot to spin the wheel again. Okay. Okay, we already did Circe. Next, let's spin again. Ariadne. Okay, I'm excited. This book has been in my TBR for so long. I'm just happy to get to it. Okay, good night. Okay, well, I just finished Ariadne.
You know what's the most exciting thing about winning? It's when you win. I love that feeling.
And I'm so relieved because I thought it was gonna be as slow as Circe was. One of the problems that I had with Circe was that I felt like the book was too descriptive, like to its own detriment. Like, you know, when you're writing an essay and you haven't met the word count, so you use filler words and filler paragraphs just to fill in space. And to be fair, in some specific moments, Ariadne did have that as well, but it was in a much smaller rate. And the thing that took me by surprise was that this was a book about sisterhood, and I never would have known because the title of the book is Ariadne. The main character is Ariadne, in fact, but one of like the main themes of the entire story was about her and her sister Phaedra. So at the beginning of the book, they're both princesses of Crete, and their dad is the king, and they're actually the granddaughters of Helios, which is Circe's dad. So basically, Circe is their aunt. So one day, this man named Theseus shows up, and he's with like 13 or 14 other people, and they were all sent to die. They were all condemned to be put in the labyrinth, which was basically a death sentence because that's where the Minotaur lives. So Ariadne, for reasons, decides that Theseus needs to live. So she aims to help him escape. And Theseus is very charming, very charismatic, says the right thing at the right time, and conveniently already has a plan on how to escape. So Ariadne and her sister help him escape. But little do they know that Theseus had other plans. That man is insatiable for power and fame and glory. If that man existed nowadays, he would be posting thirst traps on TikTok. Like, he wants to be desired, he wants to be put on a pedestal, and basically everything goes wrong from that point on. The older sister, Ariadne, follows him after he escapes Crete because obviously he got out of the labyrinth, everyone's going to be looking for him, he needs to get the fuck out. So she follows him. And the younger sister, Phaedra, she was only 13, she stays, and she has to deal with the mess that was made following the events of that night. And the bulk of the book is basically how the lives of these two sisters carry on and how they are constantly wronged in the hands of men. I love that the author made it a point to make it very clear how a lot of women in these Greek myths are often little pawns and suffer the consequences of men's actions. Like this little passage says, My mother was no more than a thin shell lying almost transparent on the sand, worn to nearly nothing by the crashing waves. I would be Medusa if it came to it, I resolved. If the gods held me accountable one day for the sins of someone else, if they came for me to punish a man's actions, I would not hide away like Pasiphae. I would wear that coronet of snakes, and the world would shrink from me instead. She touches upon Medusa's story and how often even the female Olympians like Athena and Hera are very vindictive. Another aspect of this book that I was not expecting to have at all is the drastically different portrayals of motherhood between the two sisters. Because again, these are two very different women. And when it came time for them to be mothers, I adored how drastically different the portrayals were. And I found it very realistic, and I found it very comforting. Every time I see motherhood portrayed in fiction, it's almost like it was the default. Like, yeah, you breathe air, you drink water, the sky is blue, and you're a mother. Like, almost as if there was no other choice. But I loved how Phaedra did not have a singular cell of maternal instinct in that body. So yeah, I really like Ariadne. I love the writing, I love the pacing, I liked how the characters are fully fleshed out and they're multi-dimensional. I love the themes of sisterhood, and if a man one day wakes up and decides that he wants to ruin your life, there is essentially nothing in his path stopping him from succeeding. So yeah, I love the book. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars. I'm going to leave you off with a little passage because Jennifer Saint had fire in her pen this day. I will not let a man who knew the value of nothing make me doubt the value of myself.
That's because women in power is an oxymoron. Women have always been in power. That's why we constantly have to have it taken away. That's why we're always fighting uphill battles. We're always swimming upstream. There's always a glass ceiling. There's always something. Positions of power were created by men and for men as a response to the power that women inherently hold. Does that make sense? The reason that resource and land and property and people ownership was created was because men had nothing naturally to bargain with women for. It's like, oh, come mate with me, which will probably result in you getting pregnant, which will then but disable you for over a year. And not only that, if you want that offspring that you gave birth to survive, it also has to be attached to your body for at least a few years. It's going to be a really long time before it can be really left alone without seriously like injuring itself. It can't feed itself. It can't do anything. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of women were like, no, thank you. I'll be in the woods hunting and gathering and like living my best life. And obviously at some point the men were like, this simply won't do. We have nothing. We have nothing to bargain with. We can only take by force what we want. And even then, what's to stop them from running away? And this is so evident throughout history. I mean, every single religion, government system, code of conduct has some sort of laws that limit women in a way that they don't limit men. Some of the first written rules are really all about women and what they can and can't do. And they're laws that limit women's freedom of like movement about the world. If somebody wasn't powerful, why would you need to limit them so much? Like if somebody didn't already have innate power over you, why do you need to take so many rights away from them? Why do you need to weaken them intentionally? Think about it. To give men the kind of leverage that they perceive women as having naturally. The reason that it pisses them off to see women in positions of power is because women in positions of power is an oxymoron. Women are people who have their power so limited because they already have the power to supersede. They don't actually need to be in positions of power. Only men do, because power is an imaginary thing that men made up to make themselves feel better about not being women. Because in a way, literally everything they do is to convince themselves that they are at least as good as the women. That's why all of their reward systems are so external. That's why all the reward systems are so competitive, because they don't feel as though they inherently just naturally have power. That's why there's this need for validation. That's why there's this need for attention and coddling and blaming everybody but themselves and like not taking responsibility. It's the innate knowledge that they're not as powerful. And as always, this applies intersectionally. Definitely applies to white people and people of color, to white feminism as well. A lot of the stuff people do, they don't actually want to lose power. Do you know what I mean? That's why people hold on to it. But for a lot of people, When you feel the need to have power over somebody, that's when you already should know that you are weaker than them. That's all that is. When you're trying to hold on to some kind of power or advantage that you think you have, that's actually you just admitting weakness in the first place. And when you try to make laws to hold somebody else back from the kind of things that you're allowed to do, or when you try to kneecap them in some other way, that should already tell you that you're feeling the need to cheat because you perceive yourself as weaker than that person. I hope this helps. Godspeed.
Hey, it's the next day. I'm at work. Let's choose a final book. I forgot to choose it last night. Okay, spin the wheel. The Song of Achilles. Okay. So we're gonna read 2 Madeline Miller books. I really hope this is better than Circe.
So 2 things happened today. First, I finished The Song of Achilles, and second, I watched the season finale of Percy Jackson. And now I have to sit with the fact that I'm gonna have to wait like a year and a half before we get season 2. That is, if we get a season 2, because Disney still didn't confirm anything. But back to The Song of Achilles, because apparently everyone and their mother has read this book. I was invested, but I wasn't as emotionally distraught as everybody on TikTok seemed to be. But the story in itself is gorgeous though, and the last few chapters definitely did pack a punch. It challenges the reader to consider whether somebody's sexual preference is connected to their abilities, such as leadership, which is a huge theme in the book. But all in all, this was a very solid read, and I give it like 4 stars. Reading these Greek retellings this past month made me realize what a lot of them have in common, besides being Greek retellings. Like both the books, Circe and Ariadne center women in their perspective, contrasting the traditional patriarchal lens of the original myths. Another thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of instances in these stories where women are punishing women for the crimes of men, which is an interesting observation to make if you take into consideration that men were the one who made up these myths. So even in made up stories, men are finding ways to not take accountability for their actions, and in the end, a woman is always the one to blame for it. So yeah, this was my little experiment. This was my hyperfixation of the month. I will be rewatching the entire first season of Percy Jackson tomorrow. So that's it for today. Thanks for spending time with me, and until the next video.